Sometimes the deepest betrayals come not from strangers, but from those we loved, into our homes, fed at our tables, and trusted with our children's hearts. I never imagined that my kindness could one day be used as a weapon to exile me from my own son's wedding. But here I am telling you this not for pity, but because maybe, just maybe, you've been silenced in your own family too. Before I begin, if you're someone who believes that mothers deserve respect, that truth should never be buried for convenience, please subscribe to Whispers of a Mother, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every voice matters, especially the ones that have been quiet too long. They say silence speaks louder than words, but that day it wasn't silence that broke me. It was a voice. Calm, calculated. Hers. Ava called me just 3 weeks before the wedding. She didn't stumble or hesitate. She just said it plainly, as if she were reading off a script. "You make me uncomfortable. We want peace on the wedding day? It's better if you don't come." I was standing in the laundry room when she said it, folding Ethan's shirts, my hands still damp from rinsing out a stubborn stain on his favorite white collar. I froze. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just said, "All right." Just like that. One word. I wanted to scream, to ask her what I had done so wrong to be erased like that, like a smudge on a clean tablecloth. But instead, I folded the shirt in my hand, placed it neatly on the pile, and stood in the quiet. Ava thought she had won. She thought that with that phone call, she had claimed some final piece of control over the narrative she was writing. What she didn't know was that she had just drawn the first real line between us. Not just between her and me, but between her and the truth. I didn't tell Ethan what she said. I didn't want to put him in the middle, not yet. He was still sending me texts about table arrangements and song playlists like nothing had changed. I let him live in that space of not knowing, because for a while, I needed to sit with the question myself. How did I go from picking centerpieces to being excluded entirely? I started retracing my steps. Every memory I had of Ava, every conversation, every little sting I had swallowed whole. Like the time she forgot my birthday and offered a sheepish smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Or when she called my lasagna heavy at Thanksgiving and offered to bring her gluten-free version instead. When she told the wedding planner ivory didn't suit my skin tone and suggested a muted slate dress, instead, I smiled and said, "Whatever makes you happy, dear." I had been quiet, polite, generous even. I paid for the venue, the string quartet, the orchids she claimed reminded her of childhood summers in Bali, though she could never remember which island. I picked up extra shifts at the library to cover her dream wedding, while she dismissed me like I was a nosy driver she'd matched with on a rideshare app. I told myself this was love. This was what mothers did. I had lived my whole life understanding that sometimes love meant sacrifice. But this erasure was something else, something colder. I canceled the dress alterations, cleaned out the guest room I had prepared for her parents. I didn't even touch the invoices stacked on my desk. Part of me still wanted to believe it was a mistake, that Ethan would call confused and furious and say it had all been a misunderstanding. But the call never came. Days passed, then a week, then another. The silence didn't just hurt, it gnawed at something deeper. It made me question whether I had ever truly been seen in this family she and Ethan were building. And still, I kept quiet. Until one night, when the house had gone still and the dishwasher hummed its usual rhythm, I opened my laptop. Not to snoop, I told myself. Just to see if I had imagined it all. I searched her name on social media. I looked for photos from the engagement party, the one I had hosted, paid for, cleaned up after. There was just one photo, and I wasn't in it. Ava's page was curated like a lifestyle blog. Smoothie bowls, filtered sunsets, soft lighting, inspirational captions about blooming and evolving. I kept scrolling further back. Before Ethan, before the perfectly arranged life she now performed. And that's when I saw it. A photo that made my stomach tighten. Ava younger, but unmistakably her. Standing next to a man I had never seen before, in a simple white dress, not bridal but close enough. The caption read, "Forever starts today." The date, 3 years ago. My heart pounded. I clicked on the man's username. The account was gone, deactivated, or deleted, but his name lingered. David Santiago. I sat there frozen. Everything about that picture, her smile, her body language, the way she leaned into him was real. Not posed, not rehearsed. I scrolled back up, studying her face. She looked softer, honest. It wasn't the same expression she wore now. Always tilted for the camera, always composed. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't just excluded anymore. I was suspicious. And suspicion has a way of pulling at every loose thread you didn't even know you were holding. I closed the laptop, but I couldn't close the thought. Who was David Santiago, and why had she never once mentioned him? The days that followed blurred into a quiet storm inside me. I moved through my routines like a ghost, folding laundry, watering the plants, answering emails at the library, but always with that name echoing in my mind. David Santiago. Who was he really to Ava, and more importantly, who was Ava to him? I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was probably nothing, a past relationship, a chapter long closed. But the date on that photo, the way her smile softened in his presence, the way she'd never once mentioned a past like that, all of it gnawed at me. Mothers know? We know when something isn't right. And I'd learned long ago to trust the chill in my gut more than any polite smile someone might wear. I sat down again one evening and opened my laptop, heart heavy but hands steady. I searched variations of her name, Ava Marie Santiago, then just Ava Santiago, then Ava Santiago marriage. I wasn't expecting to find anything concrete, maybe another photo, a mention in a blog. But there it was, a digital footprint she hadn't scrubbed clean. A marriage registry. It listed 2 names, Ava Marie Santiago and David Elias Santiago. June 2020. No pictures, just names and a date. My heart slowed. That wasn't a relationship. That was a marriage. And Ethan had never mentioned anything about Ava being married before. If she had told him, I would have known. He shares everything with me, at least he used to. This wasn't some ex-boyfriend story with a neat ending. This was a life she had buried. I stared at the screen, rereading the entry until the lines blurred. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. That Ava might still be married. That everything we were about to celebrate wasn't even legally possible. But I couldn't ignore it either. I printed the page and slipped it into a folder. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, full of hope, of trust, of love. And then I saw it crumbling. I needed more. I needed to be sure before I shattered the illusion he was living in. So I started searching county records, moving state by state, cross-referencing her name, his name, any potential divorce filings. The deeper I dug, the more certain I became. Nothing. No legal separation. No finalized divorce. Just that one marriage license floating like a loose thread waiting to unravel. And still, I said nothing to Ethan. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I knew the damage of premature truths. If I was wrong, if there had been a quiet divorce tucked away somewhere, I couldn't afford to destroy his wedding over a hunch. But if I was right, I couldn't let him walk into a lie. I opened Ava's Instagram again. I scrolled back to the engagement party, that single photo she posted. No trace of me, no mention of the house she hosted it in, the garden I planted, the meal I cooked. I was a ghost in a celebration I helped build. It wasn't just the erasure that hurt, it was the intention behind it. The way she crafted her world to appear perfect, seamless, as if she had bloomed without roots, without scars, without the mess that makes us real. I started a file on my desktop, labeled it Ava Personal. I dropped in the screenshots, the registry page, the notes I was taking, and then I sat back and looked around the room. Ethan's old backpack still hung on the hallway hook, the one with the frayed strap I'd sewn twice. His childhood drawings still lined the fridge, sun-faded, but sacred. How could the same boy who once cried when he thought he lost his science fair ribbon be standing next to someone so dishonest? The contrast was unbearable. I told myself I wasn't doing this to sabotage. I was doing this to protect. Not just my son, but the idea of love he believed in. I couldn't let him build a marriage on secrets. The next morning, I called in sick. I took a long walk around the neighborhood, breathing in the cold, crisp air, trying to steady myself for what came next. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman carrying a truth that could change everything. And I wasn't sure yet how to use it. But one thing was clear. The wedding might still be happening on paper. But in my heart, I knew something sacred had already been broken. By the third day, my hands moved with purpose, but my mind was elsewhere. I scrubbed dishes that were already clean, folded laundry that had been untouched, paced the hallway like something urgent was waiting on the other side of the door. I knew I was reaching a threshold. Knowing Ava might still be married was one thing, but proving it, that required stepping past my comfort zone. That required leaving my house. I went back to the digital trail. The name David Santiago lingered like an echo. His presence was undeniable, yet he had no current social media footprint. No LinkedIn, no tagged posts. It was as if he had been carefully erased, not just blocked, but removed. But Ava hadn't counted on the fact that mothers don't just let go, especially not when their children are involved. I started calling around. Slowly, carefully. I remembered something Ava had said once when I asked where she grew up. She mentioned Camden vaguely, like it was a place she wanted to forget. I typed it into a job board, looked for warehouse listings, anything connected to that area. After 30 minutes, I found a company that had posted a job 6 months ago. Their manager's contact info was still listed. I called. The man on the other end sounded half distracted, but when I asked if a David Santiago had worked there in the past year, he paused. Yeah, I think he did. Not here anymore, though. My heart stuttered. I asked if he had an address on file. He said he wasn't supposed to give that out, but I said I was an old friend trying to reconnect. There was a beat of silence. Then he gave me the number. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there staring at the piece of paper in my hand. I didn't know what I expected to find at that address. Maybe a dead end. Maybe a man who wanted nothing to do with the past. But I couldn't stop now. I had come too far. I printed the marriage license, the Instagram photo, the registry record, placed them neatly in a folder, and set it on the passenger seat. The drive to Camden took 4 hours. Long stretches of highway, flat landscapes, too much time to think. I didn't play music, didn't call anyone. I just drove the folder beside me like a silent passenger. When I arrived, the address led me to a small duplex. Paint chipping. Appealing for rent sign on the neighboring unit. I parked, double-checked the number, and walked to the door. My hand trembled slightly as I knocked. Once, then twice. I heard movement, a pause. Then the door opened just a sliver. He looked rough, unshaven, hoodie, half-zipped, eyes wary. But it was him. I recognized the face from the photo. David Santiago. My name is Sarah, I said. I think we need to talk. His eyes narrowed. About Ava. He didn't speak, but after a few seconds he opened the door a little wider. Inside, the place smelled of cheap instant noodles and dust. A mattress on the floor, no furniture, no pictures, just a single chair and a broken lamp. He sat. I remained standing. She's marrying my son, I said. Ethan. Next weekend. His eyes flickered. He looked like he'd been slapped, but instead of reacting, he exhaled and said she told me he was just a client. consulting or something. She told him she'd never been married. I pulled out the folder. Showed him the license. He nodded. That's us. You're not divorced? No. She paid me to disappear. I stood frozen. She what $10,000? Said I was holding her back. Found me in a motel. Told me she had plans. She gave me the cash and told me to vanish. And you did. He gestured to the empty room. What do you think I needed the money? My heart ached. Not just for Ethan, but for this man too. Whatever Ava had done to him, it had hollowed him out. I asked him if he'd come with me to the wedding, not to cause a scene, but to tell Ethan the truth. He looked at me like I was insane. She'll ruin me, he said. She already has. I reached into my purse, wrote a check, $20,000 for one day, one truth. He stared at the check. His hands trembled slightly. Why should I do this? Because if you don't, she'll keep doing this, and another person will get caught in her web. Maybe with worse consequences. He didn't say yes. Not then. But he didn't say no either. I left the folder with him, told him to think about it. I got in my car and drove back home in the dark, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they hurt. I didn't know if David would show. I didn't know if this would save Ethan or shatter him. But I knew one thing for certain. I had pulled the truth into the light. And no matter how much Ava wanted to keep it buried, some lies refused to stay dead. 2 days passed after I left David's apartment, and I heard nothing. I tried not to obsess, but every time the phone buzzed, every time an email pinged, I jumped. I didn't tell Ethan I'd gone to Camden. I didn't tell anyone. What could I even say? That I'd driven across state lines to track down the ghost of my future daughter-in-law's past? It sounded insane, but the silence that followed only made it feel more real. I kept busy, went back to work, pretended I still had a wedding to prepare for, even though in my heart I knew I couldn't participate in a ceremony built on a lie. Then, the night before the wedding, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was David. I'll be there, he said. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Then he hung up. No questions, no drama. Just a man who had decided finally to stop hiding. I didn't sleep that night. I laid out my dress, the one I was supposed to wear to the wedding before I was uninvited. Navy blue, simple, elegant. I didn't buy anything new. I couldn't bring myself to spend another $1 on this performance. I printed out copies of everything, the registry, the photo, the marriage license, sealed them in a manila folder. The next morning, I picked David up. He was waiting outside his building, wearing the same wrinkled shirt, the same worn shoes. I handed him a tie. He didn't speak. Neither did I. We drove in silence. The venue was everything Ava had dreamed. Grand, pretentious, perfect. As we pulled up to the stone steps, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not confidence, not anger, just clarity. I had done all I could. The rest was out of my hands. David and I walked through the entrance without being stopped. No one questioned us. I'd paid for most of the wedding after all. My name was still on every invoice. No one even noticed us at first. The guests were too busy sipping champagne, posing in front of the flower arch I had funded, chatting about how elegant everything was. Ava was across the room, glowing perfect, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Then she saw me. Her smile faltered. Then she saw David, and everything in her face cracked. She turned sharply and walked away, pulling one of her bridesmaids with her. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. She knew why we were there. She knew the story she had spent years burying was now rising from the ground. We waited near the back as the guests began taking their seats. The quartet shifted to some soft pop rendition of a love song. The officiant took his place. Ethan stepped out. My boy, My son. He looked nervous, excited, hopeful. I hadn't seen that expression since his first day of college. Then Ava walked in, and if I hadn't known what I knew, I would have believed the whole act. She was radiant, every step choreographed, every breath calculated. She smiled like a woman who had everything. But she never looked back. She didn't glance toward me, toward David, as if ignoring the truth would somehow erase it. Then the moment came. The officiant spoke the words. "If anyone objects, speak now." I stood, so did David. Gasps followed us like ripples in a pond. I walked slowly, steadily down the aisle. David behind me, folder in hand. Ava's face paled. Ethan's eyes widened. I reached him, held out the folder. "Ethan, I need you to look at this." He hesitated, hands at his sides, fingers twitching. Ava whispered something, but I didn't turn to her. My focus was on my son. He opened the folder, page by page, the license, the photo, the registry. His eyes scanned each line, each image. Then David spoke. "That's my daughter. Mine and Ava's. She paid me to disappear, to let her erase our past." The room froze. No one breathed. Ava stepped forward, frantic now. "He's lying. He's obsessed. He's trying to ruin my life." She turned to me. "You planned this. You hate me. You've always been jealous." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. Then Ethan said quietly, "You lied. About everything." His voice was so soft, but it cut through the noise like glass. Ava tried again. "I did it for us. For a clean start. That marriage meant nothing." David's voice rose bitter and broken. "That's our child. You said she'd get in the way. You gave her to your aunt and vanished." Guests stirred. Some stood. Ava's facade was cracking fast. "This isn't what it looks like," she cried. "I swear." "Stop," Ethan said. "Just that. Stop." Then he turned to the officiant. "We're done here. And to me, let's go." In that moment, I felt it. Not victory, not revenge, but something better. My son saw me, believed me, walked away with me, and nothing Ava could do would undo that truth. The silence in the car after we left the venue was different. Not the cold, uncomfortable kind. It was the silence of aftermath, of truths no longer hiding. Ethan didn't say a word, just stared out the window, the folder still clutched in his lap. I drove hands, steady eyes forward, letting the road absorb the weight of what we had just done. When we reached his apartment, he didn't get out right away. He just sat there, then finally asked, "How long did you know I told him the truth?" "Not long. I found the first hint about a week ago. I didn't want to believe it either." He nodded slowly. "And David? He's not who she said he was. He's not a ghost or a bitter ex. He's the man she used, erased, then pretended never existed." Ethan ran his hand down his face. "I think I always felt something was off, but she was so convincing. Every answer had a charm to it, a softness. It made you feel like questioning her was a betrayal." "That's what manipulators do," I said quietly. "They wrap their lies in silk so soft, you mistake them for truth." He finally looked at me, eyes tired but clearer. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up, for fighting for me even when I didn't know I needed it." I didn't say anything, just reached out and touched his shoulder. A quiet reminder that I would always be there. No matter how old he got, no matter how far he drifted. I left him that night with a full heart and an empty ache. Because as much as I was relieved the truth had come out, I knew healing wasn't instant. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild with a single apology. It takes time. Still, I believed in my son. He had been cracked, not shattered. And I trusted he'd find his way back to himself, back home. Over the next few weeks, the pieces started to shift. Slowly, quietly. He didn't call right away, didn't visit, but I understood. Sometimes the ones closest to the truth need the most time to breathe through it. I went back to my routines, library shifts, weekend baking, organizing the backyard just in case I ever needed it again. Then one morning, I opened the front door and found a small paper bag on the porch. Inside a container of my favorite chicken soup from the deli across town. No note, no name, but I knew. It was his way of reaching out, of saying, I remember. I care. A week later, he texted, "Do you still have my old toolkit I did?" I left it on the porch. He came by while I was out. The screen door creaked. The box was gone, but in its place, he left a small note. Thanks. Nothing more. But enough. Then on a quiet Sunday, he knocked on the door. Holding 2 coffees, no explanation. Just sat at the table while I made eggs. Told me about a new client. A broken lamp he fixed. A dream he had about fishing with his grandpa. We didn't talk about Ava. We didn't need to. The silence between us had changed. It no longer held fear, only respect. Then one evening, he brought someone with him. A woman named Lena. She wasn't dazzling like Ava. She didn't glide into the room. She entered gently, not to impress, but to connect. She noticed the cracked tile in my kitchen and asked if I wanted help fixing it. She cleared the plates after dinner without being asked. She asked about the photo of Ethan in 3rd grade, the one by the fridge. And when Ethan spoke, she listened. Not the way people listen when they're waiting for their turn to talk, but the way people listen when they want to understand. It was the first time I saw my son breathe, not perform, not tense. Just breathe. And that's when I realized what Ava had taken from him and what Lena was giving back. He wasn't just moving on, he was coming home to himself. Ava was a storm that passed. Loud, destructive, blinding. But Lena, she was a sunrise, quiet, steady, real. And I, for the first time in months, felt peace begin to settle in the bones that had ached with worry. My son was healing, and I was too. Together. It wasn't over, not completely. The truth had come to light, yes, and Ethan had walked away from the wedding before vows were exchanged. But lies, when they've been lived in for too long, don't always dissolve cleanly. They leave stains, traces. And there were still pieces Ava had tried to control. Payments she had funneled through my accounts bookings made in my name. The wedding, though canceled, had left financial and emotional wreckage behind. I sat one afternoon a week after the confrontation flipping through the binder I'd once used to plan their big day. The pages were now reminders of what had nearly happened. I had written every check scheduled, every vendor trusted, every promise. And now it all sat in my lap as if mocking me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. There was no greeting, only a voice I hadn't heard since that morning at the altar. Ava. She sounded different. Not polished, not sweet. Harder, colder. "I hope you're happy," she said. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I held the phone to my ear, quiet. Let her speak. "You've ruined everything. I had a life planned. I had dreams. And you couldn't stand that your son was building something without you? Is that what you think this was?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "That I did this because I was jealous." "You were never going to fit into our lives," she snapped. "You clung too tightly. Ethan needed space. He needed a future. And I was giving it to him. By lying, by hiding a marriage, a child, by erasing a man and pretending you were starting from scratch." "It wasn't a child," she said quickly. "That girl doesn't even know me. She's better off." My stomach turned. It was the ease with which she said it, as if shedding responsibility was as simple as shedding a coat. "And that's why I had to stop you," I whispered. "Because you think love is something you can rewrite. That family is something you curate, not commit to." "You planned this," she spat. "You manipulated that man, paid him to show up." "I didn't manipulate anyone." I showed him the truth and gave him a choice. He chose to speak, because some truths are too heavy to carry alone. She laughed bitterly. Do you think Ethan will thank you for this? Do you think he'll forget that you tore down his future in front of hundreds of people? I didn't tear it down, I said. I uncovered the rot before he stepped into it. He'll recover. I don't know, but I suggest you stop calling. We're done here. Before I hung up, I heard her say something else, something small, barely audible. I didn't want to be this person, and for a second, I believed her. For a flicker of a moment, I saw the girl in the old Instagram photos, the one who smiled like she meant it, the one who hadn't yet learned how to deceive. But then the call ended, and I closed the binder, and I knew she had made her choices long before I ever intervened. Over the next week, I began making calls. One by one, I untangled the financial web she'd woven. I called the florist, the caterer, the venue, explained the cancellation, cited breach of contract where needed. The refunds weren't full, but they were enough. Enough to reclaim my dignity. Enough to remind myself that I wasn't powerless. I even found a charge on my credit card from a spa she'd booked for post-wedding treatments. I canceled that too. Ava never reached out again, and I didn't expect her to. For someone who had worked so hard to rewrite her past, she wouldn't want to live in the ruins of a truth she couldn't control. Ethan didn't talk about her, not directly. But one afternoon, while helping me trim the hedges, he paused and said I almost married a stranger. I didn't answer. I just handed him the clippers. Later that evening, we sat in the backyard. No candles, no music, just 2 folding chairs and the sound of crickets. He looked at me and asked, "Do you think she ever loved me?" I took a long breath. I think she loved what you gave her. The image, the future, the safety. But love, real love, isn't about what you can extract. It's about what you give without expecting anything in return. And I think she stopped giving a long time ago. He nodded quiet. I watched his face soften, the tension in his jaw ease just slightly. Then he looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for giving me the truth." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. In that silence, I felt the crack between us start to mend. Healing, I've learned, is not a straight path. It's not a clean break followed by a swift recovery. It's slow, winding, filled with days that feel normal until a memory drags you back to what almost was. After Ava, our home wasn't filled with grief, just an eerie quiet. Ethan stopped by more often, never with explanations. Just presence. We fixed the leaky kitchen faucet, replaced the porch light that had flickered for months. Sat on the steps, drinking coffee without needing words. It was the kind of quiet only possible when 2 people know the cost of noise. Then one evening, he brought someone with him. Her name was Lena. He didn't introduce her with fanfare, just said, "This is Lena," as if I already knew her, and somehow I felt like I did. She smiled, not with practiced charm, but with warmth. Wore her hair in a braid, brought a bottle of wine, and asked about the hydrangeas I'd planted last spring. She helped me set the table, asked real questions, the kind with no performance behind them. When Ethan spoke, she listened like his words mattered, not because he was hers, but because he was human. Watching them together was like watching someone exhale for the first time after years of holding their breath. He didn't perform. He didn't shrink. He simply was. That's when I knew we were finally closing the Ava chapter. Not erasing it, but placing it where it belonged in the past. They got married 6 months later. No chandeliers, no designer dresses. Just vows in our backyard beneath the old maple tree. Ethan built the arch himself, sanding each piece with hands that had learned the weight of truth. Lena wore a dress she'd found at a thrift store. No train, no veil, just joy. We hung white sheets from the porch like curtains, borrowed folding chairs from the church down the street. The music came from a small Bluetooth speaker sitting on a stool. I cooked the meal myself, pasta garlic bread, a lemon cake that leaned a little to one side. No one cared. What mattered was the way Ethan looked at Lena when she walked barefoot across the grass. The way her eyes found mine and said without words, "Thank you for raising him." And when Ethan turned to me before the ceremony and asked, "Will you walk me down the aisle?" I almost couldn't move. I had spent months believing I'd lost him, that Ava had erased me from his life with a single sentence. But there I was standing beside him, step by step, toward a future he chose. After the vows, we toasted with mismatched glasses. Lena's father cried. Ethan's best friend gave a speech that made everyone laugh, and me, I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The peace I felt wasn't loud. It was quiet, earned. The kind that comes from knowing you fought for love when it didn't look like love at all. That you told the truth even when it cost you your place at the table, only to find that in the end, it earned you a seat no one could take away. Ava never reached out. Not a call. Not a message. I don't know where she went. Don't care. She became a footnote in a story that was never hers to begin with. And Ethan never spoke her name again. Not out of hatred, just clarity. Some doors once closed don't need to be reopened. Now on quiet mornings, I sit on the back porch with my coffee listening to the wind move through the trees. Sometimes Ethan joins me, sometimes Lena, sometimes both. We talk about small things, groceries, weekend plans, life, no drama, no secrets, just presence. That's what we earned, that's what we fought for, and that's what we keep. This is my story, not of revenge, not of victory, but of remembering who I am. A mother, a witness, a woman who chose to speak when silence was easier. And I hope wherever you are, you know this peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of truth. And truth, once spoken, never leaves quietly.